Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here in the boardroom as well as on Zoom. We appreciate you being here. We did the roll call upstairs as well as the opening statement. So with that, I'm going to go right into my board president's report. Once again, thank you all for the opportunity to serve as your board president. I wanted to start this year off with some announcements and/or changes, if you will. Those that have been with me in past years when I was president know that my style is a bit old school, and I don't necessarily think that it is a bad thing. I think it is important to bring things back to basics and grow from there. Here, where my old school is a bit obvious, I do prefer to speak by phone. I feel much gets lost in translation with email and text. So please email or text me and I will be happy to speak to the board members as soon as possible. This is probably the longest president's report you will get from me because it is important that my report be limited to board happenings and not district happenings. The expert on what is going on in this district is sitting right here. And who better than to make that report than Ms. Weldon and Mr. Hastings. This will be the case with questions from the board while going through the agenda as well. With that being said, we also will not be having reports on any district committees, which include security, instructional council, and wellness. These committees are run by the district and not the board, and it is important that we separate the two for the sake of the public and the district as well. Any information that needs to reach the public through these committees will come through our superintendent and school business administrator. Our public comment sections will be changing as per our bylaws. That section of our meeting will be for public comment only. Please do not interpret this as meaning that we do not want to hear or answer your questions. If anything, we value your questions and many times they help us realize that something is happening that should not be. However, we want to make sure that you are being answered by the correct people. We have placed Ms. Weldon's business cards at the podium and asked that all Zoom callers with questions contact Ms. Weldon as well. Her email address is located on the school website. The correct person will get back to you to answer your questions and we will be going through the chain of command. We will also be limiting the public comment section to 5 minutes as per our bylaw to ensure that comments are kept within a decent time frame. It will be a bit different, but I think this will add to a more productive and efficient meeting. We value our parents, teachers, and community and appreciate the time you give the board by logging in or being at our meetings. And I sincerely do mean that. You are all an integral part of our operation. In addition, the committee list that is in your packet, we did provide a hard copy of it for you. It is a fluid list. It will be changing once again, so just keep your eyes open. There should be an updated list coming your way probably before the next meeting. And lastly, I want to end my report with some wonderful and exciting news. Our superintendent, Ms. Weldon, got married over the winter break. And on behalf of the board, we congratulate you and your new husband and wish you nothing but health and happiness forever.
Thank you so much.
This is for you from the board.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yes, we're very happy. He's going to love the flowers.
And with that, we're going to move on to our superintendent's report.
Okay. Thank you and good evening. I hope everyone is staying somewhat dry coming in here tonight. Speaking about weather, I did put out a communication this week to the community, and the principals have been doing the same to make sure that parents are logged into the Genesis Parent Portal, that their contact information is up to date, that we have your cell phone numbers, that we have your provider because that helps us put as much of your information as possible into our communication systems. And we are working to improve. Although we can email you already, we can send you a backpack alerts. Our principals can send you remind messages. There are a few other things that we can do if we have your cell phone number and your provider as well. So we just, if you read my message from the superintendent today and you just respond to those directions and anything else you're receiving from your principal, I'm just hoping that parents and families that are listening, the more accurate information we have for you, then the quicker you will get announcements and messages from the district. And certainly as we head into the winter months, that's always a good thing because sometimes there is the need for announcements. So please take a look at those messages that we sent out. And just also, there are many, many different events going on in our schools. Some in the evening, some during the day. Our spelling bees are underway. Our GOB at the intermediate school is coming up this week. And there are a number of other events happening, a theater night at TOIS, and all of those are in my communication as well, the January events. So I encourage families to come out and see all of the great things that are happening in our schools. That concludes my report.
Great. Thank you so very much. With that, we will move on to the school business administrators report. Mr. Hastings.
Thank you, Madam President. I just have 2 items to update the board on. Attended our monthly business administrators meeting with the county superintendent and county business administrator. As you may be aware, the district applied for stabilization aid in the fall. Typically, the decision on those awards comes out in December, early January. We were advised by the county that the state had put aside $20 million for allocation to stabilization aid applicants. However, they did receive $60 million worth of applications across the state. So that is taking more time than they anticipated in sorting through those. So we do not yet have any information on what the awards will be, but they hope that in the next month or so, they'll be able to notify districts of the status of those applications. And then on the second item, which again relates back to some fall information, the district's ROD grant applications or regular operating district grant applications. We did receive preliminary approval for 40% funding on 2 roofing projects. The county has indicated that those letters, those preliminary approvals, have gone to the School Development Authority for review and issuance of their grant agreements. So again, we expect to have information from the School Development Authority probably within the next 3 or 4 weeks on how we can move forward with those. And just as a reminder, those applications that were approved were for roofing projects at Wayside and Ocean Elementary. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we will go on to the public comment session regarding agenda items. All motions are posted on the district website. At this point in the meeting, we will now conduct the first of 2 public comment sessions. The first session will be open for public comments on agenda items only. And the second session will be at the end of the meeting and can be on any topic. Would anyone from the public like to comment on any agenda item at this time? No one in the room? Ms. Conway?
Madam President, there are no commenters.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will move on to the action items. Mr. McCarthy.
Move to approve items 7.1 and 7.2.
Second.
This is for approval of items 7.1 and 7.2 minutes. Mr. Dalton.
Abstain.
Mrs. Dam.
Abstain.
Mrs. Gilman.
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern.
Yes.
Mr. Schneider.
Abstain.
Mrs. Talarico.
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein.
Yes.
Mrs. Parlamas.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Personnel.
I'd like to move items 8.1 to 8.9. A second.
Second.
May I say one thing before we vote?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to, because I did see she's on here as well. Congratulate Ms. Walgren on your retirement. I know that I worked with you a lot over at Wanamassa. You mean a lot to those students as well, those kids, and a lot of the alumni there. And thank you for all of your time with the TOEI.
Thank you, Mrs. McGovern.
May I?
Yes.
I'd like to also thank Ms. Walgren for her years of service, and I know you'll be dearly missed by the children and the staff at Wanamassa School. Wishing you the best, Ms. Walgren.
Okay. You will miss Ms. Walgren, but we still have you till July.
Yes.
So- Okay, we will move on to,
Well,
oh, I'm sorry, roll
President.
call. I apologize.
seeing no further discussion, this is for approval of 8-1 through 8-9. Mr. Dalton,
Yes.
Ms. Dam,
Yes.
Mrs. Gilman,
Abstain from volunteer coach O'Neill. Everything else, yes.
thank you. Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern,
Yes.
Mr. Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Talarico,
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein.
Yes.
Mrs. Parliamentary.
Yes,
Motion's carried.
thank you. Financial Management and Resource Services is Mr. Weinstein.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to move 9.1 and 9.2 for a vote. Can I get a motion for a vote?
Second.
Questions, comments?
Any questions, comments?
This is for items 9.1 and 9.2. Mr. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Dam,
Yes.
Mrs. Gilman,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern,
Yes.
Mr. Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Talarico,
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein,
Yes.
Mrs. Parliamentary.
Yes,
And now I'd like to open the floor for 9.3 to 9.5 for discussion.
any
Anybody want to
questions?
talk about?
Was there anything you'd like to mention, Mr. Hastings, on 9.3 through 9.5?
No, Madam President.
Sorry.
Mrs. McGovern?
I just have a question or a question on the tuition. Is it new that students in 8th and 12th get set? It is new. They'll pay 75%. Normally that's been a
So in the past, we did not, based on a certain date of the year, we did not charge tuition, but the policy has changed. There's been an update to the law that we approved this policy, I believe, in December, if not November.
Yes.
And because of that, we now have to set a tuition that will be approved by the county superintendent. We discussed giving our greatest discount that we currently allow by our current structure to students who have spent 5 or more school years with us and who are in 12th or 8th grade, because we believe those to be milestone years.
okay. So follow up on that. So if a student goes through 11th and moves on July 1st and wants to finish at Ocean in 12th, does that same apply?
We're saying this proposal here is saying that any 12th grade student at any time in their 12th grade year
Okay.
and any 8th grade student at any time in their 8th grade year who moves away from Ocean Township would be entitled to this 75% discount of our current tuition rate.
Okay, so the way I read it, whether it's good or bad, and you're the English person, but because it says discount for the remainder of their year, I don't know if that reads to the question of moving July 1st, because then it's an entire year. So I don't know, you can ponder that and see if it needs to.
Right. Okay, I understand what you're saying.
And if it doesn't need to change, I'm okay with that too, but it's just the way I read it and you read it are probably saying the exact same thing, but just want to.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay.
Okay, all right, so everyone good? Okay, instruction, education, and student activities, Mrs. Gilman.
Thank you, Madam President. Move to approve items 10.1 and 10.2, professional development for our staff and various school trips that you have listed.
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Just wanted to commend our math teacher, Mr. Keskis. I never heard of PawCat. Is that something new?
Excuse me, let me just get to it first here.
It's it sounds in conjunction with Monmouth University. I guess they discuss hacking. Just wanted to say that it sounded very interesting.
Okay. Goes along with the computer science classes that
Yeah.
we're running and training there. Not sure if it's his first time going or not. to be
Yeah, I
honest, but-
just didn't recognize it, but it's on February 16th. So no, just no need to do research. Just sounds very good. Nice job, Mr. Keskis.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Is there a second?
Yes, Mr.
There
McCarthy
was- okay.
seconded.
Sorry.
Anyone else have any other questions? All right, Mr. Hastings.
For items 10.1, 10.2, Mr. Dalton,
Yes.
Mrs. Dan,
Yes.
Mrs. Gilman,
Yes.
Mr. McCarthy,
Yes.
Mrs. McGovern,
Yes.
Mr. Schneider,
Yes.
Mrs. Talarico,
Yes.
Mr. Weinstein,
Yes.
Mrs. Parlemis.
Yes,
Items carry.
thank you, Mrs. Gilman. We now move on to policy, and that would be Mr. McCarthy.
Yes, presentation of 2, 3, 4, 4 policies, 1 regulation tonight. This is the first reading of these, specifically related to orientation for new members of the Board of Education, whistleblower retaliation protection, and air quality standards. Any questions specifically about those policies are to be directed to the administration. They're up for discussion.
Can I just have you point one?
Go for it.
In my mentorship over here, Brian had asked about what the red strikes are. So can you just remind people of what the red strikes are in case?
So the first time that we see a policy, the red strikes will be present to show the demonstration, to demonstrate to readers what is being removed from the policy. The second time that we review the policy, it should, per policy, you have to have 2 readings of a policy before it can be voted on. The second time you see it, it's in its final state. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, final state. So in the second time, it'll be its final state, and then we will read that and vote on it.
And who's been the one to make the red strikes?
The administration. Yeah.
Or Strauss Esme? Like,
Oh,
or-
well, based on the recommendation of Strauss Esme as well. Yeah. Yeah, don't apologize. It's great. Good questions.
That's what I said. It's like he sent me a list. I said, you had great questions today, but that was when I thought
Yeah.
everybody would have been.
And that's good for anyone viewing online or reading along.
For sure.
There are people who do that. Believe me.
Anyone else have any other questions regarding policy? Okay, we will move on to public relations. And that would be Mr. Weinstein.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion on 12.1.
Second.
Sorry. Thanks, I was gonna mention what it was.
I
but,
didn't tell you were going on.
Go ahead.
I don't want to jump all over you. No,
Sorry.
no, it's good. We can.
Okay, is there any discussion?
Did anybody have a chance to read all the pages and look at it?
I'll just say,
Yeah.
share some information. So I had mentioned, I think at a previous meeting, that the memorandum of agreement, which we would ordinarily have approved earlier in the school year, was not out yet from the Department of Education because it was being updated and revised. So we have received the new version of the memorandum of agreement. You have on your agenda both the link to the full version and then the short list of mandatory reports to law enforcement. And so if I could just summarize well, let me back up. I will summarize some of the changes, but certainly you can read those as well. And the revision section is 1.2 of the full document. So if you'd like to read it before the next meeting, when this will be up for a vote, it's section 1.2, which goes into the revisions. But the primary revisions of this document were intended to address the legalization and decriminalization of marijuana use. So although still not allowed for anyone under 21, the part of possession and or use of marijuana has shifted a little bit in the law. So this agreement has shifted to align with the law as well. And also there is some intent here to address bias and also the school to prison pipeline, and to try and close that pipeline. But again, that is in section 1.2, and it summarizes the revisions of this full document. And again, the mandatory report page is what is also linked there for you. That's the PDF. That's an appendix at the end of the full document, so you can look at what we will be reporting. I have met with the chief. I have discussed this with our administrators. We're aware of the changes. We have a very good relationship with the Ocean Township Police Department. We work very well together both ways, giving advice and guidance and keeping the appropriate lines of communication open, all in an effort to protect students and to get them on a path to whatever services they may need, should they find themselves in a situation that might require a report to law enforcement. Both, I think I can speak for OTPD and certainly for the school district, that our main goal is to provide a student with the services necessary to turn around that type of behavior and set the student up for success for the rest of their life. But certainly it's a lengthy document. You may want to take a closer look at it before we vote next week.
Anyone have questions? Ms.
I have a
Tellerico?
question about the assault. Are we talking physical assault or verbal assault or both?
Physical. Right.
Unless it's like.
I mean, verbal
Threat.
assault, that's a bias crime, would have to include, but just a verbal altercation between
Yeah,
two individuals would not be a mandatory report.
okay, thank you.
Anyone else have questions? No? Okay.
I
All
take
right.
back my second.
All right, we will move on to old business. Before I ask the board if there's any old business, I just want to tell the public, I know we had two presentations set up for this evening, but because of the weather, we felt that, you know, we should postpone that. Both presenters were live a little bit far away. So we wanted them to be safe on the road, so we will postpone both presentations to another date. Does anyone have any old business? No old business? Is there any new business? Mr. Weinstein?
Yeah, what I was thinking about the last number of years that we've had, that I've been on the board. And one thing I was wondering is if we see, sometimes I feel like we do things maybe a little reactive. Like we discuss test scores after the test scores are in. We discuss discipline things after there's been disciplinary action. We discuss things maybe a little too much after the fact. And I was wondering, because if there was a way for us to maybe put a schedule together on when we would want to have kind of discussions around main topics like mental health, discipline, test scores, what we're doing about those things, because I feel like we're too reactive in those. And if we're going to be involved in the policy and kind of understand it and how to react to that, it might make sense. One thing that sparked it is when I was thinking about the end of the year, I was also thinking about, when we get to these spots and we talk about discipline and all that stuff, I was reading some articles about, phone usage in schools, and there's been a number of schools who've stopped phone usage because they kind of cite that as both problematic for discipline, problematic for mental health during the school day. And then there was then there was another side to it about security and making sure parents can contact their kids. And I just want us to be able to have like a discussion time around it, as opposed to us getting a presentation and then we're having like a pop quiz on what do you think. And I feel like we don't have there's usually never a good discussion when it's a pop quiz,
I think it's an interesting point.
So I was wondering if we could come up with a calendar that allowed us to do that.
I don't know if that's something that's possible.
Well, can I finish for a second?
Oh,
So one thing is just us agree on the things that we'd want to talk about, and then we can ask Ms. Weldon if she, how to react to that. So I don't know what the whole list is. Obviously, I don't think we need a list of 20 things, but there's probably 4 or 5 things that recur every year that we seem to always, need to address: discipline, test scores, those kind of things, mental health. And so that was my first point was maybe we should just agree that we will have a calendar and what might be on the catalog of those things. And then the other is to ask Ms. Weldon what she thought about that. That was my cadence to that.
Let me ask you, is that a possibility? Does that make sense to do something like that?
So some of the presentations are required to be reported in a timeline after those results are made available. So we cannot veer from that timeline doing that. But if you wanted to add additional things on top of that, we could discuss the schedule. I have been asking presenters to come to share presentations with the board at almost every meeting. I think December, maybe we didn't, just because of the hurriedness of that month. And we were hoping to have the ESL bilingual presentation this evening and, other ones coming up. So I have been choosing things that I think are important for the board to know about the work that we're doing. We did have Mrs. Hanson talk about the behavioral threat assessment and the different mental health services that we are providing. In addition, we had the assessment presentations in there as well. So I'm happy to look at any input from the board of topics you'd like me to add to that. And then I think we just have to discuss a schedule that makes sense based on the requirements that of
Right.
what we must also present on a timeline from the state.
Mr.
Yeah,
Weinstein.
I guess for me, when I would see those presentations, I really I didn't necessarily have enough time to research it myself on what I wanted to ask or talk about or be thoughtful about. So if I knew, if for me at least, if I knew that there was a schedule, here are the things we're going to be talking about, then in advance, I would get my head around, okay, that topic, give myself some time to research it, talk to people, get my thoughts in place. So that's why I'm looking more for a calendar of things. And by the way, I do appreciate you doing all that. It was very, very helpful. I didn't feel like I could participate enough. I felt like I was, in a pop quiz kind of thing. Like, you have any questions? No, sounds good. Which I don't mind.
Right,
but,
no, and
yeah.
I would agree with you that I think that was presented in that vein, that it was informational and
Right.
not necessarily a dialogue. So if we're talking about creating a dialogue around topics, I think our preparation would be different then, and we should know that, and the presenter should be ready for that too. That would feel like, I think we should talk through what that would feel like for the presenters as well, so that
Yep.
if there were questions in advance, so they could feel that they were not in a pop quiz situation and that they felt prepared to answer all the questions you may have.
Totally agree. I think that
around
makes a
the
ton of sense. Yep.
Okay. Any comments from the board? Mr. McCarthy?
I think that I like this idea. And I think personally that it borders more on initiatives that we want the board to be focused on, right? The key themes that we want this board to be focused on. I think it's a bigger topic. And then I also think that we should have a recommendation from, we should come up with our own ideas, but this should be collaborative, whereas the administration also tells us what they would like us to focus on, to give them guidance on as well.
Yeah.
And those kinds of things. And I think that to steal from your advice to me is maybe you should come up with something and present it to us on what you think we should.
I thought I was doing my part. I thought I was doing 80% of the part right now, just saying, hey.
Maybe something to get this started though, in all seriousness.
Sure.
Of like, because I think that this is a great idea. I think we should run with this. I think that we should be in collaboration with the administration on it, but I think there needs to be more discussion of what this will be, what it will look like, how we will execute it before we start to make moves on it.
Yep. Good.
Any other comments?
Jeff, do you see this being aligned to our goals and objectives for?
It can, but I don't know if it does need to be. So things like discipline, we're not, that's not one of our objectives is to make sure discipline is curbed, right? But that's not a board goal, right? So I don't think it fits into that. There are things that we run into every year. How important is it about testing? What are we going to do about testing and making sure test scores are good? And then we get into the discussion about whole students and how we emphasize that. And we do that a little bit after the fact, right? And I think and around discipline, bathrooms and discipline in bathrooms, we always have these discussions that are very cyclical. And then there's just a new spot about, mental health and technology and how that's all impacting us. So I'd be happy to come up with a schedule. I don't think it would be too many things, but I just wanted to I did talk about this with Jim when we were doing this, and I didn't really make too much progress, but I think that this is probably the time to make that kind of progress because, we don't have a, big COVID distraction or anything like that. We can get back into policy focusing, but things that attach itself to what's important to the district and the community. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it.
Ms. McGovern?
Can we get to Ms. Weldon's point? Can we get a calendar of what you have prepared to maybe start thinking about, I'm sure you're a couple months out or something, just to know some of the upcoming things. And then maybe we go from looking at that and going into
a good idea.
deeper dive of what
It's a good idea.
No, it has absolutely been my intention to bring presentations to the board to showcase things that are happening in this district that I think it is very important for you to be aware of work that the staff is doing and the growth and the achievement of our students. Absolutely has been an initiative of mine, and I can absolutely share the presentations I would hope to continue to bring. They are of the mind of more presentation, less dialogue. So I would want the right then to adjust them slightly based on this new direction, which is fine, but I would want to adjust that.
But by the way, the intent of talk is not to bring more work to anybody, right? It's more to that if we're going to be collaborators, I think we have to figure out how to collaborate, right? And if we're expected to support and be supportive of what you're doing, we also want to have the context of how we got here. So I think that's really, because, I get quizzed a lot on, where we are with test scores and how we are with discipline and all, you get quizzed a lot on these things. And
From the public?
From the public, yeah, right. And I
would ask you to encourage them to reach out.
Of course, yeah,
Well,
of course.
so-
Yeah, but you could talk about that if people don't want to, because they don't want to get they want to get involved, but not that involved.
Understood.
Right? So, but it'd be good if we could find that balance.
Understood.
Yeah.
Mr. Dalton, did you have a question?
Yeah, I'm thinking out loud. So what I'm hearing is that there needs to be a clear delineation. There are requirements by the state that certain things are done at certain times of the year that every school district must do. And maybe we need to be just abundantly clear that that's required, right? But looking at the strategic goals and all, I do hear part of what Jeff is saying does somewhat align, right? So, maybe that we also look at how it aligns to what we're already doing within the strategic goals, and that those updates, go through some of the activities that are on here. And what
many of the presentations are born out of that strategic plan and things that we need to be working on or have been
And so
working on.
even when you're talking about discipline, like when you read through this, there might not be something specific to discipline, but there are things about the climate and culture and things like that, which if you want to focus on discipline, you need to be focusing on the climate and culture, right? So I do think it does align to these goals and can be an outcropping of how we report out on our goals.
Okay.
But I think it's hard sometimes for the public and even the board sometimes to understand that there's just all these requirements by the state that you have to present something in the public. And it might not be exactly what some people would like to hear or does not necessarily answer their questions, but it is a required activity. So I just think, let's be clear about that. That's all. But looking through the strategic goals and all, it's there.
Okay. Are there any other comments from the board regarding this topic? Is this something that we'd like to do?
I'll put a straw man together.
Okay, I think in addition, maybe Ms. Weldon can provide a list of.
I can send it to you and
That would be
put a
great.
straw man again, just to kind of get the ball rolling.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
But however Ms. Weldon wants to take it,
Sounds
right behind you.
Thank you. Is there any other new business? Okay, all right, we will move on to public comment on any item. Anyone in the room? Ms. Hayes?
Hi, Alex Hayes. And I don't have to say my state or my address, so that's all I'm going to say. I have, I think, 8 questions. I didn't want to get up earlier. I could have asked one, but I'm just going to start with the first question, and I might just rattle them off so that I don't go past my 5 minutes. I know other people have throughout the year, but it's different that we're going to start enforcing that now. So the government did declare a state of emergency today. I was just curious if that would ever implement the virtual meetings that they did over COVID. Like, could you all have met and made this all virtual so that nobody had to come out here in this storm? We've had several emergency declarations over the past couple of months over weather, but they never landed on a school board meeting. So I thought that might be interesting because perhaps that's why there's nobody here. So that is number 1. I don't know if it's possible to check into that, to see if we could ever fall back on that. And then maybe you guys could even meet an executive from home. Number 2, because of the cancellation of the 2 reports, I know you guys knew about it, but we didn't know about it, the general public. So I'm, may or may not have come if I had known there wasn't going to be the ELL presentation today. So since we post on our Facebook page that there's going to be a board meeting, it would have been awesome if there was an update like, hey, we're not going to be having this massive ethics tutorial and we're not going to be having this massive ELL presentation. Okay. Wondering if there is, some of these are questions, some are comments. Wondering if there is a construction on the middle school or an update on the middle school construction. It seems like most of those 18-wheeler things are gone, and it looks great. Just wondering if it's done along those lines, because this is maybe a Mr. Hastings question. Another question for him was, over the break, there was an RFP that ended January 3rd. It was a little vague. It was 51 pages or so, and you didn't really get to the what are we asking people for. It was the social and emotional learning and mental health, but it didn't say what. It was like an RFP for social, emotional learning and mental health. I was looking for a little bit more what that was until on page 44, it did finally get to the fact that we were looking for a 24/7 provider. So I'm wondering if Mr. Hastings or somebody or Superintendent Weldon could elaborate a little bit more on that. I have always pushed for fairness in bidding and awarding of contracts. We even say things like we won't take companies from Russia or Belarus, however you say it. But I did not see any language in there that says we would give extra points for minority-owned, women-owned, and those types of organizations. And it seems that for the last 8 years, we refuse to make that a checkbox. So I'd love to see if we could have that in an RFP. But that was a question to see if we have all of our stuff in there for that RFP. The construction was a question. Another question, 3rd and 4th graders are going to be starting their extra help, in English with the grant. So Superintendent Weldon, for those parents who may feel that their kids should have made it, but didn't, get the call back to start having after school help, who do they call? Kind of like we did with the Spartan summer programs. If you weren't selected, the previous superintendent said, reach out to us, and if there's space, we'll let your kid in. So who can they call for that? Almost done. The enrollment figures, I know are not public for right now, but they do become public at the next meeting, if that's correct. The monthly enrollment figures. There was no PDF, for the layperson. I know you all get it. And I think that's it, except, oh, 2 more. Sorry to ask. You can ask me to repeat these if you need. When do negotiations with the Education Association start? And the 8th grade Spartan Schools document that went out today was quite extensive, but it was only in English, the one I got at least, because I have an 8th grader. I'm just curious if we are putting it in any other languages for multilingual families.
Okay, thank you. Someone will get back to you.
When?
Hopefully this week. This week.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you. Ooh, that was great. Ms. Conway, is there anyone in the queue that has any comments?
Madam President, there are no commenters.
Okay, thank you so much. With that, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all so much for coming out. Nice job.
Thank you.